And if you have no idea what I'm about to present about, I'm about to present to you the Register with GP Surgery service. This is the new national product that allows you to, for patients to register online with your practice. And I'm going to suggest, I know you're all frantic, you're all really busy, you've got lots of pressure on you as you approach the end of the year. I'm hoping that we're going to spend about 30 minutes to go through what is this product and how does it work, and then maybe take questions at the end. I'll try to look at the chat, but can I suggest that hopefully a lot of the questions will be answered as we go through it, and then maybe at the end we can just catch up with all those points. A bit about myself. So I am a GP. I'm the London Digital First GP lead. And really, I'm here to try and sort of help you do what we're hoping that most practices will consider in terms of enrolling with this service. So just to flag on this sort of slide here, if you've never seen this product, if you have your mobile phone at hand, just scan this QR code here on that slide. You can actually just test the product with a dummy practice. If you want more information about the service at any stage, there's a QR code here. If you want to know a little bit about myself, there's a code here as well. And this on the left is the product we're about to talk about. So here we go. So my challenge, and don't worry, there's no swords, there's no violence involved in this webinar, but my challenge is the thing I'm about to show you is so simple, so quick to set up that you could set this up by the time I've finished talking about this in 30 minutes. That's my challenge. And if you think that's a crazy challenge, lots of practices have. So when I've done this webinar, by the end, they have them set themselves up. You could argue that they just didn't want to hear ever again from me. And they just thought, if I do this and get rid of Shankar and he doesn't bother me again, who knows? I'll let you decide as we go through this. So like I said, what we're planning to do is, how does this work? Why on earth should we use it? How do we set it up? And any questions at the end. And like I said, you'll see a QR code throughout the slides to test the service. So how does it work? What is underneath the hood of this service? Well, let's look around us to see what's going on with websites and government websites. Have you renewed your passport? If you have, I personally found it a really simple service. You just upload your photographs online and it's all done quite quickly. Renewing your road tax on your car. And, the NHS, if you look at the Find My GP website, which we'll look at a bit further on, it just helps you find a service. So we can see that, the government website, the NHS websites are moving to not just giving us information, they're getting us to do transactions, do things on their platforms. And there's also about these accessibility standards, that these websites have to be simple, clear communication to meet all our different patients' needs online. And, it's just a common design structure. So there's the NHS website starts to reproduce a similar structure and design about, green buttons and easy buttons to sort of go on to the next page. So there's a similarity across the government and NHS websites. If we look at this product, first of all, it's free. I don't know if I mentioned it's free. If I haven't mentioned it's free, I'm going to mention it several times. This is a free product. It's not something that practices have to pay for. It's essentially funded in the NHS in terms of the NHS Digital England team making it and maintaining it. And it's accessible through different ways. You can link it to your practice website. You can put posters. They can find it through the Find My GP site and then in the NHS app. We'll pick up that a bit later on. But this is a critical point. It's not that this process will automatically register the patient with your practice. So your practice remains autonomy about processing this. So it's not automatic. And it does reduce the admin burden for you. And we'll see how that happens later on. Who's using it? So it's been piloted over the last couple of years. Last autumn, so a few months ago, it started to roll out for everyone. There's 650 practices already across the country using it. That's growing every day. And I'm just talking about some figures from Northwest London, where I am. I'm aware that there's more than 70 practices in our area doing it. So again, the QR code here is there for if you want to test it. There's also a link in the slides if you want to click on the link. So the product fundamentally is asking that new patient questions to collect data like all our registration forms are doing. And we all can have different agendas. Here's me communicating with this bird in Galapagos. We can all have our different mindsets. As a practice, we have our mind about what are the questions we want to ask. The patient may have their own agenda about wanting it to be a quick process and not find it too exhausting. So we look at how the questions are chosen. They're chosen from GPs, professionals working in general practice. The NHS Digital team have come up with the questions. The questions are standardised. As a practice, you can't change them, but they're constantly updated, tweaked, or amended based on feedback. So as more and more practice come on board and we look at it, this product will constantly evolve. So here's me on a slide, and I'm going to do a whistle-stop slide through the next series of slides. I'm going to show you at a glance the questions. I'm not going to linger too long because it'll become a really boring presentation, but your slides are shared. So when you land through on the first page, this is a single form that adjusts to the patient profile. So there's not a child form, there's not an adult form. It will evolve based on the profile of the date of birth and how you complete the steps. There's no need for a separate GMS1 form. I think this causes a lot of practice confusion. When you look at it, if you capture the date on the GMS1 form in your process, you don't need a separate GMS1 form. The patient can use the NHS login, which helps with obviously authenticating and verifying their identity and pre-populating bits of the form, but it's not essential, it's optional. So this doesn't cause more digital exclusion that they need to have created their NHS login. So let's go through those steps. So with adult registration, there's obviously details and date of birth. Once they've done that, it then looks for, do they know their NHS number? If they do, they put it in. If it doesn't, not a problem, they can continue without it. It then asks if they've been previously registered with a UK GP before, their current UK address. And this is a step that I will dwell on for a second. This is flagging if their address is outside a catchment area for practice. So the first dilemma that a practice may have, and hopefully you can see the clear text here, but it gives a warning. If the patient puts a postcode that's outside your catchment area and that's tracked through EDEC, it will say to the patient this warning, and it'll say some GP practice will only accept patients that are within their own catchment area. You can continue with this registration, but it may not be accepted. And it really gives the patient two options. Do they want to continue with that warning? And so your practice is not obliged, your practice will receive those details, but it's already warned the patient that you may end up rejecting it. Or it gives the option, does the patient want to search for a different GP who may be within their catchment area? So just want to capture this step of how it tackles catchment area issues. Then it's talking about contact details, how the patient want to be contacted, asks about gender, ethnicity, and then it gives the option to choose their prescription. So it tries to manage the EPS setup for you. So whether they want to choose their pharmacy, because obviously if they're moving areas and you leave them on their legacy pharmacy, that first GP who sees them may forget it and send a prescription to somewhere in the middle of nowhere in England. And then you've got all the hassle of counselling, reissuing, and so forth. So it already builds that process in, gives them options to find a pharmacy and check the details that they've chosen as their preference. So that information is sent over to you at the practice. It asks some of the GMS questions. So if you're a member of the armed forces or registered with the Defence Medical Services, emergency contact details, if they've recently moved to the UK, and if so, certain documents that they may not have. It just queries them about those. So again, picking up some of those GMS1 type form information. Are they returning from overseas? Where were they born? And their current GP surgery that they're hoping to leave, if that applies to them. If they've lived at previous UK addresses. And then some of the medical information now starts to emerge. So medical conditions, allergies, mental health conditions, disabilities. Have they got a carer? Or are they a carer themselves? Medication, so are they on particular repeat items? And how often do they leave alcohol? And if so, how much? The question in the chat about fields that are they mandatory? Some are mandatory, and some are not. But what is very clear is that the absolute minimum to register the patient, all of that details are mandatory. And I guess if you test the process and have a look at it, you can see how that works. And like you see, if you answer yes to a question, it will open up the further questions that are relevant to that. If obviously if they drink alcohol on this slide, then it will ask them about their alcohol usage. And there's bits about other bits in chat which we'll pick up later on. So it talks about smoking. And this just shows you if they were trying to register a child at the beginning of the process, if they choose the option but they want to register someone on their details, it kind of shows you the flow if they do children. So it starts to then in the children thing, ask about education, anyone else involved in their care, and then triggers about vaccinations. And then before they submit, so when the patient or their carer or their parents done the form, it just shows them a sense check of what data they've entered, and they hit a submit button. They then get an acknowledgement. So they get this application now completed, tells them what happens next. This is my, look, by the way, I just use any photographs I can do on trips and holidays, but this is from, just an image of maybe they'll celebrate, they'll do a dance, their families submitted their registrations and they can relax. And the work now passes over to you in practice. So how do you, so you're asking me, how do you now receive the form? What happens at your end?
Shankar?
Yeah.
Would now be a really good time to maybe just jump into a couple of questions that have come through, or do you want to just wait till the very end?
I can jump to a couple of questions. So first of all, custom things. There is no ability to customize this process. You cannot locally change that series of questions. And I know you may find that frustrating. And when you look at those local processes, there could be lots of things. You may have some other local information. You can have things about PPGs, other bits. What I would suggest to you is, I think, look at what I go next with why would you want to do this or not, to see the vision or the agenda before you think, oh God, that's not going to suit our practice need. What I do think practices may want to do is, if you do this section of process, you may then want to add a second step to this. Do you then get this information in and ask for some second information collection or information sharing that you do? That's probably how I would say you would capture the next step. And I know that may sound really frustrating, but if I show the next series of how does this work, how does this connect into things, maybe then you can see where the vision is and you can see where your frustration may go into this. With the data set, the more practices you think, well, this is a critical question we all want to have, this product will constantly evolve. So I think at scale, we would then get to really a standardization of a process that meets most practices' needs. It won't meet every practice's need. But I think if you bear with me, I'll pick up some of those questions at the end. But just imagine you cannot customize this platform, but you can only feed back to the national team about questions you really think should be captured. And then that discussion about does it get added or not. And think of it a bit like any online consultation product as well, where we had that problem about, is it endless questions and do people find it difficult to complete? But I'd also add that bit about, do we get good data back? I mean, in the chat, there's bits about weight and height. Is it always accurate? Is it always usable? And, are we also getting data already through GP to GP transfer on most of our patients? How are our data needs in that? But can we just leave that a little bit as we go further on, and we'll pick up that in the end questions.
That's perfect, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to show you how you receive this. So at the moment, you receive this as an email. So the email data comes through from the national team with the information from that patient, first of all, in the body of the email. So you can see like things here in the email that you can cut and paste, but also as a PDF at the top. So whether you want to include the PDF into the patient's record once you're registered, it highlights at the top of the email really important points. It'll flag to you if the patient used NHS login, so you may feel that their verification is more accurate. It'll also flag if they're outside the catchment area, if there's other critical information, it'll be flagged at the top. So your admin team will find that quite helpful at the top to see if there's key things they need to pick up as highlighted. So how do your patients find this service? I mentioned it briefly about these areas: practice website, the NHS website, and the NHS app, and your practice level communication. I'm just going to walk through how you would promote it to the patients. So here the practice in Ealing, and just the practice website. They could just put the link in here, so they can put their normal process and picking up some of the questions. Even if there's different local steps that you want to do and you build it into your process, if there's things you want to do, that could be one way you capture it on your practice website. Then you've got practice other resources. So we'll come up with that later on, but there's posters and other things. But I think your practice website will be one of the most critical ones. Then the national NHS website, the Find My GP page. So that link, when they get routed to it from wherever they land, that could be the NHS website. They then pick the Find My GP section. So what starts to evolve is when you're activated for this service, when your practice returns, it shows a box here saying online registration available. If you're not activated for this service, it obviously doesn't show. We'll pick that up later on, but this only will flag if you're on the register with our GP surgery service. If you've got some other online registration system, you cannot connect it here to show that it's an option. If they click on it, it then clicks to how to register with a GP surgery, and then it links them to the Find My GP service. They just click through effectively. So it integrates that whole process into the Find My GP service. That's one bit that I just wanted to highlight to you. Then I want to highlight the NHS app. So even now, this is a screenshot from my own NHS app. I've just taken out my NHS number, so I don't cause problems for myself. You can see here the Find NHS Services or the Find My GP type site is already down the homepage. That integration is due to improve, and that's due by the end of this month. So that the integration to the Register My GP surgery and that whole flow improves. So as NHS app users look at changing their practice, it becomes a pathway through there. And what are the future bits on that roadmap? There's a paper form. So look, although I'm the digital first lead, clearly digital does not work for all our patients. We still need paper forms that our patients can use. I don't know if everyone wants to go on mute if someone's just talking, but there's that bit too, the paper form. There's the whole review of the questions, which I've alluded to, and I've just shown you a manual process. You get it as an email, you cut and paste it or put it into that registration process that you do already. But there's automation of this that's planned. So the national team are looking at integration with your EMIS or System 1 platforms, and the hope is that that's going to arrive next year, so that the automation was, will it come in as a task, will it help you manage it, but still that you have control of the process. So that would reduce your workload further. So that's why I'm saying if you get on board now, will you start to reap those benefits as that interoperability arrives? But beyond that, as an interim, we were working with, or the national team working with other third-party providers to try and automate that data entry process. So you're not having to even cut and paste the alcohol, the data in, it starts to become automated. So this is the bits on the roadmap that we'll try to keep you updated at the national and the London team with how that evolves. Okay, so first of all, in this first section, explained what is the product, how it works, how it arrives to you. I now want to talk about why should we use it. Now, you may have just totally lost interest from what I've shown you so far. You may be really happy with your current paper forms like this practice manager here. If you do, can I just urge you again, just test the process while I'm talking. Try it with this QR code. And if you want more information, if I just haven't covered your question, here's a link to the national website, which gives you more information. But maybe, just maybe, paper isn't always the best. Even if you have the most beautiful registration form, can we read handwriting? Does the patient actually fill it in completely? What's the use of perfect questions if no one really completes them? So there's lots of benefits. Data quality, it starts to match the patient with the spine as they start to fill in the process. You've got to have less mismatches generally. You've got the NHS login as one bit of this, but also the data that's been collected is the minimum that requires that. This is free. I mentioned free a couple of times. We've got so much pressures on budgets. Everyone thinks, do we have to pay as a practice? Does the ICB have to pay for it? There is no cost to this service. There's no cost that has to be planned in push budgets. I've shown you some of the integration with Find My GP and NHS app. It builds in some of the catchment area functionality, so you don't have that problem as much. Yes, it helps you manage it from that first point the patient's entering the data, and it's fully accessible. You don't have to worry about maintaining it. Do you meet the current accessibility standards? All that headache's taken away for you as a practice. I'm not going to go through these slides. It kind of just goes into more detail of those points, but these slides have been circulated. But I'm just highlighting some of those benefits again in a bit more detail. But I'm going to go into this one, income and business. And I'm not a GP partner. I just want to emphasize I'm a sessional GP, I'm salaried, I don't look at practice profits, but I'm going to say, can you as a practice afford not to be using this service if your neighbouring practice is? If your patients return and one of them has an option that has a click-through option that they can do at 11 o'clock at night when a busy parent wants to register the whole family, and that's one of the conversations in the chat. If you've got 3 kids, and you want to do 4 forms, and I can do this tonight, practices next door doesn't have that option returning. We live in a TripAdvisor, Amazon, eBay, one click, how many clicks type culture where we're all busy people. Are they going to be more likely to pick this practice? And that business perspective of how does it affect your future registrations, particularly if it becomes exponential, that more and more practices enroll with this system, is that something you cannot afford not to be on, is the point I'd make here. And some feedback from some of our practices. So I'm in the Ealing Borough in North West London. Here's some practice managers giving feedback, and these are we're normal practices in Ealing. We're not racing to change. We're not want to be first with digital things. They don't feel obliged to me as their digital leads. These are practices that actually went live before I even asked them. So this is one. This is another. I'm not going to read through their comments, but I think you can see the theme that they just thought it did reduce workload. It reduces some of the stresses. It did help with the NHS branding and just reducing some of the paper and clutter. But let's look at the limitations. Bright lights aren't everything, and I'm just going to be open here where I see the limitations. The first thing is we cannot customize the questions locally. But I've picked up on these comments or my thoughts. Is it become do we avoid too onerous a process? Do you add in an additional process locally if you want to supplement to it? And do we suggest changes to the national team if we really think things are critical? And then here, the thing about authentication that you can't upload photo ID, proof of address as part of the process. It's not built in. But you can, again, supplementary. If you really do want to see this, you can obviously text them or email them a link to ask them to provide it. I showed you a practice website flow where you can ask them to fill in the form and then ask them, can you send it? A couple of things I would say, though, is remember some of the GDPR things. Even if you get the data from the patient with ID and address, you can't save it into the patient's record. You've actually got to destroy it straight away. So even if there's a query in the future, you can't look back. We live in a digital world. I don't think we can think about fraud. I think anyone could send you anything. You won't know if it is valid or not. And we're not meant to ask for ID to prevent a registration flow. So that isn't essential information to stop them registering. And we have all got contracts that show those as terms and conditions that we can't block registrations on it. So there are limitations, but you can build local flows to work around them. So let's suppose you did take the challenge. You went live during this webinar, you'd done your enrollment, you used it, you raced to it. It just was not for you. You just thought, this is not to be in our practice. This just doesn't work. It's not a permanent change. You could email the National Registered GP Surgery team. They could unactivate you, unroll your service for you. So I'm just saying that there is always a get out. If you really didn't think this would work for you, we genuinely hope that that's not going to be the case, but you can do that. So we've done the first bit of the webinar, which was what is a service? The second bit of the webinar was why should we do it? Third bit is I'm going to show you again to whistle stop, how do you set yourself up? So first, relax. I know you've had the presentation. You may have lots of busy things to do. The slides are already, I think, uploaded and shared on your TeamNet. And I just want to show you the steps that I think you may want to do as a practice to save you the workload of imagine what you need to do. So this is the most important step, self-enrollment. So this is to go into the NHS Profile Manager. The NHS Profile Manager is what you use to respond to NHS website reviews. Here's a QR code if you need to quickly go to Profile Manager. So usually the practice manager is already set up for it. If you have problems getting into the Profile Manager, you can go to, you can email for support on this email address or call this number. And there's 24 hours, 7 day a week support to get in. So once you sign in, I'm going to show you how quick this is. This is going to take you seconds. You click here on this menu option that arrives, sign up for register with a GP surgery service. It asks you to, again, are you ready to launch the service? And really, the most critical question is, do you have the email address that you want to use for your practice to receive all those registration forms? They ask you to select the practice. Your practice manager, or if you have a profile manager, you may have more than one practice profile on it. So you just got to pick the practice you want to set up for your profile. It's asking you for that email address, that shared generic email address that you want for your practice, to enter it in. They then send a validation code to that practice. So once you've got it, you've got to enter it in. And it's asking you two questions. First question is, does your surgery offer a language interpretation service for the patients? So it highlights the patient that they can, you do offer that service. I think the question is going to be yes for pretty much every practice, surely. Obviously, I think you've got products like Language Line or Silent Sounds or whatever you have in your area. And then the second question is, do you want to offer your patients the opportunity to nominate a pharmacy during the registration? You saw me walk through that flow where they can then select a pharmacy if they want to change it. Personally, I'd reckon that most practices would want to have that yes, because it helps you manage that flow as part of the registration to avoid problems downstream. That is it. Those are the two questions you're asked as part of going live. And it just shows you a screen to say, do you want to confirm the details of your email address, that you offer the language service or the nominate pharmacy service? In this case, I've actually said no. Gives you the option to change it if you want to change it. And you just click confirm and complete. And that is done. That was how long it takes. It takes seconds. You then have the registration confirmation. And the most important thing here is in this registration, it gives you this unique link, your URL link, for what you use with your patients to direct them to your practice's landing page on the registration service so they can register with it. So that's what you may have to use in your websites and so forth. And you get a confirmation by email as well. And the Find My GP web page is usually updated within 48 hours. That is step one. I'm going to go through the next few steps quite quickly, but they're not critical, they're just tips maybe. So I would recommend in your NHS mailbox that you create a registration inbox. In the inbox, you create a subfolder for registrations if you don't have one already, and you create an NHS mail rule. This rule just means that emails from that national registration team will automatically be moved into that folder inbox. I've also put something like a category on if you use categories in your NHS mail, just to really flag it and make it very clear that you've got registrations coming in. So that's tip 2. Step 3, do a test. You've gone live. Just use the link use the link for your practice. Test it. It's working. Do a test at registration. See that it's coming in. This is a photo from one of the pilot practices actually testing their processes with their patients. And if you want more feedback from this pilot practice, here's a QR code here just to see their experience. So step 4, maybe add that registration link into your website. So add your unique link, maybe refresh or delete any references to other online registration processes or the processes. If you have problem updating your practice website, usually you can contact your provider for help. Step 5, what do you want to do within your practice? Maybe you want a poster like this could be useful, displaying it on the external windows near the reception area. And this is just one you can download here, that editable poster. There's also more comms materials on this QR code. You might want to use something in your media screen. So here's a slide that you could just use. And again, you could update with your own QR code. So they could, if a patient was walking in the waiting room, they've got some guidance on how to register there. How do you create QR codes? If you don't know, it's really simple. You can do this from your Edge browser. So if you have that URL link that you got from the national team, you paste it there. You just click on this icon in the sort of the browser window, and it just shows you your QR code. You can download it, paste it into posters. You can do this with anything. So you can transform all your posters with QR codes. That's with the Edge browser. With the Chrome browser, it's basically the same. There's only one slight difference. You go here, you create QR codes, and it creates your QR code with a lovely dinosaur in the middle. That blank area in the middle is not critical for the QR code. So you could add in your practice logo, icons, do anything creative you want to do here if you use the Chrome browser. But effectively, the process is the same. Registration forms. You may have paper registration forms. I think it's worth just updating with a little signpost to say, look, did you know, you can still do this online, and you add your QR code or link in this. So you're just trying to still promote, even if you're handing out paper forms, do they want to just abandon the paper form and do the digital process? But fear not, the national team have created a paper version of the form. I'm just going to show you a glance of it here. So this is how it looks. So this just reproduces the national process. It's in draft. It's not yet for circulation. It's been tested with pilot practices just to see if it works. So here's page 1, page 2. Here's page 3, page 4. Here's page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8. So maybe you're going to just switch your whole paper form to this when you arrive. And the hope is that really in April next month, you can start to use this. So you've not just got the digital solution, you've got the paper solution. Again, you could tweak it by adding extra pages at the end, maybe if there's local data or process you want to do. Step 8, maybe create some text presets. Here's some examples here. So, when you've got the email from them, you register them, you just text them as standard to say, yep, you've been registered. Or if you aren't registered them because they're outside your catchment area, you may want to have a preset here. So just a couple of presets that you may want to build to help you with the process. Update your practice email auto reply. I think if you have a generic email address for your practice, I always recommend have an auto reply there set up, and maybe just add a signpost to this. So patients who randomly find your email address and thinking about registering, just signpost to it there. Number 10, email signatures. So some of your key practice staff, maybe your practice reception managers or admin team, do they want to update their email signature just to signpost again to registering with the practice via your link? Data entry, so you may be using an EMIS or System 1, I think predominantly obviously EMIS template to enter your data. You might want to just tweak it, realign it to mirror the national forms. It's just easier. That's something that probably you want to have a discussion with your ICB or stuff, whether they can help it at scale. We have flagged again that it would be great if the national templates in our core systems were updated to, or we just made it easy that the data entry mirrored the order of the actual form. And then finally, the final step, and I appreciate I'm coming towards the end of time, but the final key step is none of our reception team are going to be comfortable to mention it to people or explain it unless we tried it ourselves. So just get some of your key stuff just to try it. Here's that again, that demo, sorry, not in this one, but I've shown you the demo QR code or how to use a link with the demo practice to test it. If they test it and they can see it kind of works, they're going to feel more comfortable about you rolling it out within your practice. And sorry, that one here is one again, another one of the pilot practices. So you can read their feedback about their experiences, but they felt that there was a definite admin of benefits, and that's what we are battling, aren't we? As teams, we're tired. We're getting constant requests for more things. And I'm really saying that for a lot of practices, they'll see a benefit with their workload doing this. That is it. I'm going to start to wrap up here. So this last slide just helpfully tries to have some of those useful links that I've mentioned during the presentation. And I put some QR codes as well if you need to quickly scan it. And I'm now really open to questions. And in terms of time, I think we've got about, I think you've got 10 minutes left, haven't you, in terms of how you've scheduled this? And happy if you, 5 minutes.
Q&A. Yeah.
So,
and then 5 more minutes for myself, just to cover lots.
Yeah. So then if there's bits from the chat we want to pick up now, and if we run out of time, also happy to pick up questions outside of this. So anything that people want to potentially ask?
Thank you, Shankar. The chat's been quite busy, so you might want to have a look in there. I don't know if there was any questions you'd already answered, but if we scroll up to the top.
Yeah, I think just thinking through the questions, and I'll so just picking up from the top downwards. Customization, I've already answered that. We can't customize. Height and weight at the moment isn't in the questions, and I think it was a bit about accuracy of data, but again can be flagged. The bit about PDF copy of the medication, at the moment they can't upload any data as part of that process. They can only type it in as well. The family, does it ask you to add a member? There's a bit about the flow at the beginning about are promoting about are you doing it for yourself or others, but it doesn't automatically trigger have you thought about registering everyone in your household, but it does make it an easy process if they want to do that. One step backwards about this being a step backwards for some practices because they feel that the flow came in automated. I do sympathise with this. If you have a customised solution with a customised flow within EMIS, but this national solution, the EMIS system one, they're aware of it. The conversations are starting about the interoperability. I imagine there's going to be a move that they start to move more towards this, and that interoperability about that flow, it's definitely on the roadmap. That agenda, the conversations have started with EMIS and System One. It's just about the timeframes before you actually see it happen. So totally recognise that if you're in 2024 seems a long way away. That's also trying to be really realistic. The hope would be that, you know, if progress and it happens this year, be great, but wouldn't want to create false sense of assurances that you're just going to see that in the coming months. Remember the interim options we're talking about? There are providers and products that are already looking at automation. Some of those providers are, I understand, releasing their solutions within the next couple of weeks. So if that workload aspect is important, there are solutions out there. Quality of data, yes, echo that this helps remove handwritten paper forms, makes it easy to create that. The other thing about two screens, that's obviously a local ICB issue about funding dual monitors and single monitors for practices. But yes, definitely dual screens can help with your admin team putting the data in manually. Okay, I'm glad to see the chat comments about standardization being supported to that. Really, do we all want to spend hours trying to just endlessly look at our registration forms and tweak it? Does this help us naturally just to get to more similarity and standardization for our patients? It answered questions about SER, local records, online services. I would echo that. I think the complexities, I can see how the national team would find that complex because we've got so many different data sets and how we communicate it, that I do think it would probably be an extra step in that admin flow, that if you do receive it and you feel like you want to communicate that next step of decision making, that you may have to do that. And I respect how that can be cumbersome, but you may feel that that is the only way that you could add it onto this process to meet your local needs. And ethnicity is already captured in their flow that I've shown you. And when you see the slides, and maybe if you look at practice, that will hopefully help you with that element of data capture. So I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. Are there any other before we run out of time? Someone's asked to forward the slides. I think it's been uploaded to you in your teamlet, but I'm happy after this, I'll also email it to you directly for the person to post their email address in the chat. Okay, I'd also appreciate any feedback you have. I mean, I really appreciate your time you've given me to present it. I've tried to make it useful for your practice team and admin to just get on board. I have done this relatively recently. If there's anything you think could have been useful in this presentation, please let me know if it could be done better, because I can improve the next presentation for the next ICB or PCN. So I want to make sure this helps practices and you guys, because your time is limited.
Thank you so much, Shankar. That was really, really helpful.